Welcome back to the channel, everybody. We're obviously not in the garage today. Thought I'd get outside, go for a little drive, and tell you about this bumper project I've been working on for the Plain Jane Jeep. So this is my 2017 Jeep JKU. It's just a very stock sport model at this point in time, but this will be built up into a full-blown rig to do what I want to do, if you will. But one of the first major projects that I decided to tackle on this, besides, I guess, some bolt-on stuff from the existing aftermarket, was to make a bumper for it. So there are a ton of bumpers in the aftermarket currently, and I think there are some very, very, very good ones out there, but I got to the point when I was looking for a bumper that I just couldn't find something that I really wanted. And so sometimes that snowballs and then you end up building your own bumper like this. But generally, the major thing I found with the Jeep JKU platform and in general with the market was that most of the bumpers, at least that I could find, always mounted the winch either rather high and it obstructed airflow to the grill, or it was the winch was low, which is good for weight and things like that, but then the leading edge of the bumper was always the Haas or the Fairlead, and that always made it a very common contact point off-road. And so your Fairlead, be it a roller or a Haas Fairlead like this, would take a lot of damage. And so that was one of the major things that drove me to design my own bumper. So I wanted airflow into the grill. The JKU platform, in my opinion, doesn't have a whole bunch of extra cooling capacity. And so keeping the grill as unobstructed as possible was important for good airflow. And then I wanted the winch weight low. I wanted the Haas up and protected and out of the damage. And then I honestly wanted something like an 8274 winch, which I run on a lot of my other vehicles, or a Bellevue, the big upright winches. But that wasn't really possible on the JKU, I don't think, to get all those things combined. And so what I did was I went back and I found a winch with the performance that I wanted in a different package. So first we'll talk about the bumper. So the bumper is a relatively simplistic design. It is not what I would call ultra compact or an ultra small bumper. It is, I would say, a small bumper. It does, extend past the corners of the grill and meets up with even the stock fenders fairly well in this area. But what drives the design of the bumper in the JKU generally is the 4-bolt mounting pads that the factory tow hooks are attached to on the end of the bumper. And so that was my, I guess, 0 point. I didn't want to chop the length of the frame down. I think that was a little bit too much of a modification for me. And honestly, with the winch I ended up selecting, I don't think I could get the winch back much further without creating a whole bunch of other headaches and modifications. So I decided to use the 4-bolt mounting pad on the end of the factory 4-bolt mounting pad on the end of the frame, and that's where I designed the bumper from, was that plane. So this bumper, it doesn't require it per se, but I did elect to remove the factory crash bar that goes underneath the frame in the factory application, and that allowed me to clean up the lines a little bit under the bumper, make it a little bit shorter top to bottom, and this bumper is roughly level with the bottom of the factory sway bar mount for reference. So then we get to designing the bumper and materials, shape, stuff like that. So the factory bumper, surprisingly, when I took it off and weighed it, I didn't know this actually going into the project. I knew the front bumper was probably a little bit heavier than most people think. It has some steel in it. It has that crash brace. It has a lot of plastic, lights in my case, and some things like that. So I found out that the factory bumper was over 50 pounds, which was honestly surprising to me. And so not knowing that, I did have a rough idea that I wanted to make the bumper that I was going to replace it with not monstrously heavy. I think it's very easy to add weight to a Jeep, and keeping an eye on that through the whole process is a good plan. And so this bumper package, the bumper itself is only 33 pounds, and that is constructed from 3/16 100XF high strength steel. So that is a formable 100,000 PSI material. So about, 2.5 times as strong as your typical, like regular HRPO, hot rolled, pickled and oiled steel that many bumpers are formed out of. So even though it's still 3/16, which I think if you wanted to be really aggressive with the bumper strength, weight savings, things like that, you could probably even do this bumper out of 1/8 inch thick 100XF material. But I decided, and it was actually quite a lot easier to find this material in 3/16. So I decided to make the bumper out of 3/16 and be mindful of the design so that it wasn't super big and heavy. And one of the ways I did that was to integrate the winch mount right into the design of the bumper from the beginning. And how I did that was I decided to transition the winch from, I guess, a normal traditional foot down mount, which you see in a lot of bumpers and bumpers designed, and then brought back the older style, like the 8274 or the Bellevue, some of the older Warren commercial winch bumpers and things like that used a foot forward design. And so that let me basically combine the bumper and the winch mount into one piece. And in essence, all I've done is made a very fancy winch mounting tray that looks like a bumper. And that's one of the reasons why it's so light. So again, this bumper, just the bumper, there are some brackets and auxiliary stuff I'll explain, but in general, just the bumper shell is only 33 pounds. I tried to minimize welding in this bumper as much as possible with that high strength material. Generally, you want to do as much forming as you can and not welding, because welding to the 100,000 PSI weld strength adds another layer of complexity. And so if you can eliminate that, and this only has very limited welding in the outer corners and one brace that supports it on the back. And so that is all out of the area that is essentially structural. So the entire structural area for the winch mount and how it ties into the frame is all an unwelded and just a formed assembly. This does have multiple extra brackets that attach to the main shell. One on the top here, one on the inside, and then one on the bottom. And the purpose of those are to help spread the load out beyond those 4-bolt mounting pads onto the frame rail. So this frame, this winch bumper package has 9 fasteners to the frame per rail. So there's the 4 in the front, there's one on the top that we use, that's a factory hole, and then there's 2 large 1/2 inch fasteners on the inside of the frame rail that brace to these inside points, and the outer or the inside structure of that 4-bolt mounting pad, and then there's another bracket on the bottom that goes back and grabs the 2 bolts for the factory sway bar mount on each side. And so that really helps spread the load out to the rail on this frame, and I think makes the whole overall structure a little bit more aesthetically pleasing too. The factory Jeep frame rail is frankly kind of ugly. It has a lot of the hydroforming for the crash zone features, and so the brackets help cover that up and blend it into the frame rail in an aesthetic way, especially here on the top. There is no welding with this bumper for mounting or doing anything in the frame. The inside bracket, depending on what your JK you have, does require both of the large holes. On this frame, a late model frame, one of those is factory, and then you have to drill one. On earlier JK frames, they may have both holes. They actually did change that somewhere in the production. I don't know the exact point, but the computer models that I used to design the frame actually have both those inner holes. And so it's an easy process to mock the bracket up and then drill that hole you need on the inside of the frame. It's one of the first things you do during the process, because you have the inside of those holes gets a large nut plate that's fed through the end of the frame. There's 2 holes on the front of the frame plate that get a slot cut to open that up so that you can get the nut plate inside. I kept the shape relatively simple. It has a little bit more angles and shape that's probably going to show up on the video, but in general, it is just a channel shape in the front and the bottom. The bottom is completely flat. That way I can use things like my taller jack on the bottom, or a traditional farm jack, or whatever the case may be. Some of the overall height, I wish in the design that it could have been aesthetically about an inch shorter top to bottom, but some of that was dictated by the size of the winch I used and how much clearance I wanted on that winch. So I think on a stock vehicle, it looks a little bit tall, but again, it's only as deep as the sway bar is. It's only about a ½ inch beyond the factory mount on the inside. And so there were some limitations for design, but if you wanted to do a smaller winch, you might be able to make it smaller. But I have a rather big winch in here that I will explain later. So I think that kind of covers the bumper itself. And then the winch mount is, I actually made notes for you guys because I always feel like I forget stuff in these videos, and so I decided to make some notes. It's almost like a script, so I can cover all the points that I want to. And so we'll go on to the winch mount itself. And so what's special or different about that is that, number one, as I mentioned, the mount has been rotated so that the winch is mounted foot forward. That allows me to use a lot less material in the bumper, or have a lot less material in the bumper, and give it a lot less weight. And then the other unique thing that I did, and I've only seen it done a handful of times, I did it on a friend's Suzuki Samurai. We came up with this idea years and years and years ago, but I flipped the winch over. So if you just take a bottom mounted winch, a foot down winch, and you roll it forward, the fairlead would still be on the bottom edge of the bumper. And I didn't want that, because this bottom edge is what sees the most abuse off-road, and the fairlead and whatever you have on it always takes a bunch of abuse. And so I wanted to get that off. And so what I did was, after basically rolling the winch forward to get the forward mounting surface, I also rotated the winch over. So I flipped it over 180 degrees, and that moves the fairlead to the top mounting bolt position of the traditional 10 by 4.5 mounting pattern for a traditional full-size winch. That does require using a winch that's low profile. There's only so much room from the mounting surface of the bumper to the things like the radiator, the transmission cooler lines, the sway bar, things like that. But I was able to actually get this winch beyond the plane of the bumper. And again, this bumper bolts directly to the frame pads on the 4-bolt pads on the end of the frame for reference. So this bumper is actually, as far as depth goes, much shorter than even a stock bumper, and the stock tow hook package, all that kind of thing. Of course, this has one of my Haas fairleads, which is the harsh operations synthetic safe unit. This is just my design of a normal Haas fairlead with a few, I guess, details or additional features. One of those is that it keys into the bumper to provide load support and to provide a smooth transition for the winch line past the steel surface of the bumper. So this bumper was, of course, made with the perfect size slot, if you will, to give that very smooth transition. And I think just having the Haas up is going to greatly decrease the amount of damage that it sees on the trail. I don't care what you make these things out of. They can be aluminum, they can be fancy, they can be anything, hard-coated, all the things. And if it's seen rock contact off-road, it will see damage. That damage will then cause damage to your winch line, especially synthetics. And so if you get that up out of the rocks, that's the best overall plan. Some small features on this bumper is that there is a little bit of styling in it. Again, I went for a very utilitarian, commercial, basic look with just enough, I guess, special features or pizzazz to kind of clean it up. I didn't just want, a square channel bumper. I did want to have some shape to it. And so I did things like these tread plates here in the top. That acts as basically, when you have a lifted Jeep, sometimes you end up having to stand on top of the bumper to work on something in the engine compartment. And these just give a place for your feet to have some traction, so you're not risking slipping off the top of the bumper. I also have holes in the top for what I call rope posts. These are actually just manufactured or made from a bicycle peg or stunt peg, if you will. But basically I can add those to the top of the bumper without tools. The top of the bumper has a square hole. A carriage bolt comes in from the bottom and the peg screws down. That lets me hank extra winch line during complex recoveries or moving from one spot to another, or whatever the case may be, where you don't want to have to reel the cable back in all the way, all the time, or every time. There's also, I designed in, and again, one of the things that forced the overall height of the bumper being just a bit taller than I would have liked for aesthetics, is I designed in a license plate mount that could stay in place full time while being able to use the winch without having to move anything. So this is a normal USA license plate, other than you have to trim a little bit off the top. And then with the way, at least with the Haas fairlead, is that the shim for using it with a 3/16 thick bumper is trimmed so that the top edge of the license plate slots under the bottom of the fair lead to retain it. And then there's just two small threaded holes in the face of the bumper. And then the license plate also covers up the bottom mounting hardware for the winch. So I think that kind of covers the bumper, its general features. And so I guess I'm sure you've noticed these big yellow recovery points on the front. The yellow is a nod to the Be Safe recovery gear brand. This vehicle is going to be used to showcase that brand in some ways. And, you know, trying to make a JK stand out in a fleet of JKs is probably going to take a little color if you're going to be trying to be basic with it. So these recovery points use the entire factory 4-bolt mounting pad, just generally like the factory tow hooks do. There is all the additional structure behind them for that's a companion with the winch as far as strength goes. And so what I wanted in recovery points was looking at that with, I guess, a blank sheet of paper and a fresh, beautiful butterfly here, a fresh set of eyes. And so I started with a completely clean sheet of paper and decided what I wanted for a recovery point. And for me and the business stuff and how I've used things for the last many years is synthetic rigging has become the go-to option for me. I don't use much metal in my rigging anymore, and I constantly am trying to get away from that and try and build safer systems, things like that. And so I wanted a recovery point that was designed from the beginning to be purpose-built, if you will, for synthetic rigging, but also because I try to be as, I guess, forward or backward thinking, if depending on how you want to phrase it right now, is these recovery points are also functional with hard shackles. And I think in some ways they're actually more functional with hard shackles than a traditional tab and hole style recovery point. So these allow you to use one of your normal 3/4 inch shackles, and you can use that either the pin side or the loop side, and you can also use them in any direction, up, down, or sideways, without a major decrease or cross-loading of the hard shackle. So this version of the recovery point, this is just a prototype at this point. This is something I wanted to do for a long time for myself. I don't know 100% if I will bring these to market, but if you would like a set, please reach out. But other than that, this is more just explaining the whole entire concept and details that I wanted, and where I got to. This isn't a sales video. This is a video about what I'm doing on this Jeep, and I'm trying to share that with you. But in my opinion, a recovery point like this, which is a loop-based smooth recovery point, these are CNC machined from 6061 T6 aluminum, and you know, it's a very nice finished product. These were powder coated yellow, but the general concept could be made out of anything from forging to casting to whatever. For prototypes and even functional parts, I think the CNC machining is a very nice part. It's just that it's a very expensive part at this point. It starts out as a large block of aluminum, and there's a lot of aluminum that has to be machined away, so that comes with some cost. But what these allow, man, the flies are crazy out. What these allow is the passing of the top knot of the shackle. So there's enough of a soft shackle. There's enough room to be able to do either the small side or the top knot side of a soft shackle. And that includes the shackle used in the soft hook technique for the winch line. This recovery point is held on by 4 1/2-inch grade 8 fasteners, backed up by multiple thicknesses of 3/16 100XF material, in addition to the factory frame mounting pad, and then all that load structure that goes beyond the bumper back to the frame. So one of the strongest ways to do a recovery point. I'm not going to talk numbers on ratings or whatever at this point, but I am very confident that these are complete overkill for a Jeep this size. Yeah, so that's the recovery points. Again, I'm lucky and fortunate enough because of Brendan's Garage and now Be Safe Recovery gear that I am to the point where I can design products and test things that may or may not make it all the way to market. And honestly, if somebody else made these and they were a good quality product, I would buy them. I hope they don't take my ideas, of course. That's never fun. But I'm not just out there to reinvent the wheel because I can. I am going about this in a way that addresses deficiencies I see in the current market. I would much rather be able to buy all this stuff off the shelf and just go out and play in my vehicles all day, every day out in the hills. But I've got to the point where it's I ended up making some things, and those things are getting hopefully more popular. And now I can build more things and try more ideas and hopefully get those ideas out to you eventually. But again, none of these products, other than the Haas Fairlead currently, is available on the store. But if you have a want for these products, or you want to give me feedback or whatever the case, please contact me. I'm always willing to discuss the concepts, the idea, the engineering, what my thoughts are on it. So yeah. The last thing I'll talk about with this project is the winch. And so that kind of brings it a little bit full circle, because that's where I wanted to, that's what drove a lot of this bumper design in the first place. So I wanted an 8274 winch that wasn't the size of an 8274 winch. And so what does that mean? That means something that's fast, no load line speed, powerful. I think I think the 8274 is a great combination of power and speed. It is not just fast, it is not just powerful, but a good combination of both those things. The line capacity on an 8274 is quite impressive. And one of the things with the 8274 or a Bellevue or whatever is it doesn't have the braking system internal to the drum, so that makes it favorable for use with synthetic winch line. And so with all those things in mind, I started looking around in the US market and then globally for what was available to meet those requirements. And what I found was a company in the UK called Goodwinch. And so they are basically selling, I'll call them hot rodded versions of some of the older super winch designs, low profile designs. And the one I decided with to go on here is the Goodwinch 9.5 TDS large drum challenge winch. So this is, I would call it a mid to large winch. It is not a small short drum compact winch or anything. It has all the things that make the 8274 special, I think, in a much more compact, normal profile. So this version of the winch has a 6.8 horsepower, 5,000 RPM bow 2 motor. So that is a upgraded motor from what you would see on most winches. 6.8 horsepower is quite a lot. They actually have now a even larger motor option, the bow 2 plus, which is I think nearly 8 horsepower and another 1,000 RPM faster. But in this application, unless I was willing to offset the winch to one side, it would not fit basically from the center line of the winch to the inside of the frame rail. That motor is too long. So this is the largest motor you can get with this winch that allows the fair lead to be centered in the profile, side to side. This winch has a no load line speed of 67 feet per minute, and it is snappy. So it is every bit as fast as I would say a 6.5 horsepower XP motored 8274. I know there are ways to make 8274s much faster with gearing changes and twin motors and all those things, but comparing this to a stock or now the 70th anniversary version of the 8274, things like that, I think this goes toe to toe with those. This version is the large drum version, and so it has a larger than normal drum, and how they do that is they actually make the drum slightly narrower by about 1/4 inch per side, 3/8, but then they make the drum flanges much larger, and so that basically there is actually, on this version of it, there's a small lift block that has to go under the winch, between the winch and the mounting plate, to allow clearance for that drum from the mounting surface. And so this drum will hold 125 feet of 7/16 winch line, and that's at a point where it is still not stuffed full. You can still get access to everything that you need to. The winch line is not rubbing on the tie bars or anything like that. And then if you want to run 3/8 like I am on here, this winch will actually hold 150 feet of 3/8 winch line, which is even more, in my opinion, than comfortably fits on a stock drum 8274. To get the winch mounted in this profile with the foot forward and flip design, I did have to clock the disconnect lever, and then I will say this winch has one of the smoothest disconnects I have used on an off-the-shelf winch. So in that way, it smokes the 8274 for free spool speed ease, unless you have like an air disconnect drum or something like that. But this one is a very smooth. You can walk with the winch line. You're not having to yank and pull and have a whole bunch of resistance for that. And then the other thing that makes this winch unique or compete with the 8274, in my opinion, is this winch has the braking mechanism external to the drum. And so this doesn't have any brake components inside the drum. That means it's not generating heat inside the drum, and that means it's safer for synthetic winch line. On this, I am using, like I mentioned, 3/8 winch line. I am able to fit 150 feet of it, and then I am using my soft hook technique for the integration of a soft shackle into the end of the winch line and how that stores. Thanks. Had somebody stop by and say howdy. I'm just off the road here. But anyways, lost my train of thought. Oh, soft hook. So that's how I run my winch line. I find it the best compromise of having, or the best combination, I'll say. It's not a compromise. It's a combination of the best things from running a hook, a thimble, or just a loop, in my opinion. It lets you do all those things. Very compact storage, ease of use, ease of repair, ease of maintenance. No metal in the system whatsoever. The storage is nice and tight. All those kinds of things. I did do a couple other little interesting things as far as the winch mount goes. I was able to do this removable, I'll call it a weather guard, be it sun, snow, rain, ice, whatever, that is over the top of the winch, that has a Velcro panel that is quickly detachable either direction, and a section of basically a boat awning connection, and so it just slides right out of the way. And so, you know, day-to-day use, it doesn't have to be there. You can just pull it off, throw it in the front seat or whatever, and use your winch like you normally would. But it does provide some storage protection for UV degradation over time, and, you know, keeping more stuff off your winch line. So that's probably long enough now. I'm almost scared to look at what the counter on the timer is. Looks like we're at like 37 minutes. So I think that's mostly it. Oh, I did think of one more thing, and it wasn't even in my notes. So you'll notice I did have to remake the control pack for this winch because I rotated it. The stock one won't fit behind the winch, so it moves to this area over the top of the motor between the winch and the bumper. I was able to find, it's actually a clear plastic cover, which kind of ended up looking kind of interesting, but in general it was just the right size to fit perfectly in this space. And then I basically wired in the stock controller, which I will say on these good winches is quite impressive. It's very similar to the old Warren design that has the toggle switch, which I find is very intuitive to use for forward and backwards. You don't have to look at anything. So they get bonus points for providing that. And then beyond that, I added a wireless winch controller from X-Bull. It's a unit I've been using for a couple years now. I have very good luck with them. They come with 2 remotes. They use AAA batteries, which can be swapped out for lithium cells, and even now you can get USB rechargeable AAA lithium, so you can always fix them on the go if you have a USB charging cable. And then it comes with 2 remotes. The remotes are large enough to work in a gloved hand. I find them very good for range. Latency's low. All the things work very well on them. The only special thing I did with that was a wireless winch controller will always power up the radio, so there will be a small parasitic draw for the receiver. It's always looking for one of the remotes to turn on, and so I decided to I put a power switch basically for that, so you have to turn on the power switch, which turns on the wireless function. That way I don't get any long-term parasitic draw. And then I also decided to, and something I've done on my past winches, is I decided to put in a couple, I call them bump buttons. So they are just a momentary switch on the side of the controller that allows me to bump the winch in and out without having to grab any kind of controller, be it a wired or wireless remote. So it's basically like on the control box option for winch control. I find this really handy for when I have to service the winch, or if I'm just trying to tension things or clean up the winch line or something like that. So yeah, I'll probably have to do a better box with trying to hide the wires a little bit more. The clear is kind of interesting that you get to see all the wiring inside, but overall it turned out to be just the perfect size and lets me keep an eye on everything inside during the testing phase. So yeah, here we are 40 minutes later, listening to me drone on about a bumper. But thank you for following along if you made it this long. If you have any questions, you can drop an email to info@brennans-garage.com. Check out what we have at the website, brennans-garage.com. You can even get stuff like merch now with hats and shirts and some other fun things like that. And yeah, it's one way to support the channel. Of course, you know, give the video a thumbs up if you like any of this stuff. Drop a comment below if you have any questions. If you like what I'm doing, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications when new videos come out. But thanks for following along, and we'll catch you on the next one.